just because I don't believe that Christ or Jesus was, God or part of our God, I'm banished into hell, or in some cases, in some sects, Christianity banned me from entering heaven. Why is it that even if I live a moral life, why is it that even if I worship my God, that I'm banished into hell just because our history?
Professor I debated up in Connecticut. He said, the only time that I accept something is historically reliable is if everybody agrees on it. Okay, I disagree with that, and I think you do as well. Okay, good. Now, the obvious question that you've been raising is, how many people have to tell you about an historical figure before you're going to believe that that figure lived, right?
No.
Okay, then what is your point?
How many reliable sources from that time, not people around them, not people after, not people, how many reliable sources from that time?
From that time.
From that time, from around the world, there's two kinds of people. If someone didn't believe Jesus was God, he should have still written about his feats, but no one did.
Okay, so let me make sure I've understood you correctly. You, in order to believe that an historical event took place, have to have multiple people living at that time who wrote about it. Have I understood you correctly?
At that time with different inclinations. Not people who are connected to each other, not people
Good.
who live in the same.
Do you know what you have just wiped out? All of ancient history. You've just wiped out Greco history, Roman history. You're telling me you can't accept any history that does not have a plethora of eyewitnesses who disagreed with each other, all writing at that time. You've just wiped out all Roman history, all Greek history, all Israelite history. You've just wiped out all Arab history. That was pretty effective. Herodotus...
That is intellectually dishonest.
Oh, no, it's not. It is the absolute truth.
It really, really is.
Who do you trust to tell you about ancient Greece? A guy named who? Herodotus. Who do you trust? And who are all these other people who wrote about, who were at that time? And Herodotus wrote about events that were hundreds of years before him. Hundreds of years. How do you find out about a guy named Alexander the Great? Because you have a bunch of eyewitnesses who were Alexander the Great's buddies who wrote about him? No, sir, you do not. You see how naive you guys are when it comes to history?
There's archaeological evidence.
There is archaeological evidence with the Bible too.
That Jesus existed?
What you actually have is one individual claiming that 500 people saw the resurrection of Christ. And if your burden of evidence for believing something is you can't prove it's not true and one person said it, I could believe anything. I could believe absolutely anything. I could believe in the tooth fairy, because if someone wrote that the tooth fairy existed and he said that 500 people saw the tooth fairy exist, that would be precisely the same amount of evidence that exists for the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
All right, we're going to have to start at ground level here, ground zero. There is a difference between scientific knowledge and historical knowledge. Scientific knowledge is based on the repeatability of an experiment. If you prove something scientifically here at UT, but you cannot show it in London, England, in a lab, it's not science. Science is based on your ability to repeat the experiment that taught you something. And if you can't repeat the experiment, it is not scientific knowledge. Historical knowledge has nothing to do with repeatability. You don't haul Abraham Lincoln back in here in a lab and have him assassinated by John Wilkes Booth every September. That is not historical knowledge. Historical knowledge is based on a single event, eyewitnesses seeing it, and they write what they see. Science, you've got to be able to repeat it. If you can't repeat it, it's not science. History, you never repeat. You record what you see, people do, they write it down. That is why when you guys say, scientifically, you've got to prove the resurrection. You're in the wrong class, guys. You don't scientifically prove that Washington was the first president of the United States. You historically verify it by eyewitness testimony.
Moral relativism
Yeah.
does not mean that there is an absence of morals.
I never said that. I said moral relativism means there are no absolute morals, no objective morals. Obviously, every moral relativist creates their own morals. Obviously.
But
Right?
there was a time before Christianity, and humanity was not just murderous, and I mean, before and after
Obviously.
Christianity.
Yeah, he got
So,
destroyed.
right, so there were ways that human beings created a stable civilization
Yes.
without the moral teachings of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely correct. And all of my atheist friends are very moral people.
And all of
Every one of my atheist friends is a very nice guy.
And all of these
Every one of them.
all of these moral sets that guided civilization before Christianity were developed independently from each other, and people were not really any more brutal or less brutal than
We
they
agree.
were right before and right after they
We
converted
agree.
to Christianity.
People who've never heard about Christ can live very moral lives. In fact, all of my atheist friends live very moral
So
lives.
were all of these separate moralities developed from the word of a different God, or is it possible that humans have an innate sense of reciprocity and an ability to develop morals without the word of the God?
Obviously, you can develop a moral system as an atheist who believes there's no God. But what you cannot do is, you cannot say or live your life as if the moral system that you created is absolutely right.
But it doesn't. That
In
is
other
irrelevant
words,
as long as
in
it's
other
mutually
words,
agreed upon.
if I say to a KKK person, racism is wrong, if I'm a moral relativist, what I have to say is, not racism is wrong. I have to say, from my perspective, racism is wrong. But I realize, because there is no God, there's no moral absolute, so for your perspective, my KKK friend, racism is right. I am not right, you're not wrong, you're not right, I'm not wrong. It's all relative, guys. It's just a taste. And I'm telling you guys that you know that Dr. Martin Luther King was onto something when he talked about the value of all people created in the image of God, which is why segregation and racism is absolutely wrong. And James Baldwin, the black author, poured scorn on people who said, well, we know why racism is wrong, because the intellectual ethics professors at Harvard and Yale say it's wrong. And James Baldwin said, you got to be kidding me. You think racism is wrong because some dude in an ivory tower says it's wrong? Give me a break. Racism is wrong because all human beings are created with value, innate, intrinsic value, because they're created by God for a purpose, which means racism is wrong not because I'm an educated white guy. No, racism is wrong because it is a violation of the innate value of a human being created in the image of God. You see the problem with relativism. You can't live it
To
out.
share morals, they have to share. In your definition, they would have to share the same faith.
No.
Not necessarily.
When the Muslim says to me, a Muslim rejects Christ. When a Muslim says to me, there are moral absolutes, I have no problem, because the Muslim believes in some type of God. But when an atheist or an agnostic says to me, there are some type of moral absolutes, they're being intellectually dishonest. And they're either ignorant or they're being deceptive.
I know people that know Hebrew because I've learned it from my father before, and from my father before that.
Good.
Right, passed down for tradition from Sinai.
Right?
At Sinai, Jesus was not mentioned. Everything was given up there and brought down.
Yeah.
So you said 500 people discovered Christ. And what happens to them? They all die. 500. So you understand what we're saying is that we cannot ask these 500 people what happened. Did you see this? No, because they're not there anymore, and we don't know who they are. But with 3 million people at Sinai who received the Torah from God, I can trace that back. I can trace myself back So those 3 million people, the specific names, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, back to Moses. So how is Jesus Christ more reliable than what the original is? What it's based off?
I would encourage you to put your faith in Jesus Christ because the evidence is he died and really rose from the dead. He lived out the Torah magnificently. So the evidence is he's consistent and he's reliable. He was dead and he rose from the dead. So you can trust him. He didn't slam Moses. He agreed that Moses was inspired by God. I am a follower of Christ. I worship a Jew. I worship a Jew. Jesus was a Jew, not a Gentile. So, all the anti-Semitism that is going on in the name of Christianity is a farce, obviously. Because a Christian is someone who worships a Jew. So if somebody says, I believe in Jesus and I'm going to go into a synagogue and blow Jews away, major, major hypocrisy. Major breakdown in here. Major. If you're a Christian, you worship a Jew. You believe that God became a human being and he was a Jew. So anti-Semitism in the name of Christianity is a violent contradiction, obviously.
I'm a Muslim, and most of the moral values I have, most of the things I abide by, follow Christianity. There are some differences in detail. I do follow the Ten Commandments.
Beautiful.
And the problem I'm having is, like you said earlier,
Right.
history happens once. And
Thank you.
The problem here is your history and my history change in various parts. And just because I don't believe that Christ or Jesus was, God or part of our God, I'm banished into hell. Or in some cases, in some sects, Christianity banned me from entering heaven. Why is it that even if I live a moral life, why is it that even if I worship my God, that I'm banished into hell, just because our histories are different in this case?
Okay, good question. Do you think that Jesus taught that the way to heaven is by living a good life? By keeping the Ten Commandments? Do you think that's what he taught?
I guess, yeah.
No. See, if you can go to heaven by keeping the Ten Commandments, why did Jesus get nailed to a cross? He didn't need to, right? You see, what Jesus claims is, although I have tried to keep the Ten Commandments, I have failed. I have blown it. I'm not this great person that I wish you would believe that I am. I am a sinner. And according to Christ, I cannot work my way to heaven by working in a soup kitchen trying to do penance and make up for my bad lifestyle. Instead, I need God's grace, which is his undeserved love, forgiveness, and generosity. When Jesus was dying on the cross, 2 thieves were hung on either side of him. The first thief turned to him and said, "Come on, buddy, get us off these crosses, and then we'll believe in you." The second criminal turned to the first criminal and said, "You fool, we bleed and die here because we deserve it. But this Jesus, he's the innocent, holy, pure Son of God." And the second criminal looked into Jesus' face and said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Now right there, it's all on the line. Jesus could have looked the guy in the face and said, "No problem, but first, you will get down and you will feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and do a bunch of good deeds." He didn't say that. Instead, he said, "I tell you the truth, today you'll be with me in paradise." That's grace. Undeserved, unmerited, unworked for love, forgiveness, generosity. So either Christ is wrong, that the way to heaven is through his grace, or he's right, that I can never work my way to heaven by being a good guy and keeping the Ten Commandments. Instead, the way to heaven is through the sacrificial death of Christ on a cross to pay the penalty for my breaking the Ten Commandments. Now, when I receive God's grace, I'm a hypocrite if I don't struggle to obey him. And so you coming into this culture will meet Christians, quote unquote, who have accepted Christ, put their faith in him, but they live like the devil. Don't believe him. When you put your faith in Christ, if your faith is genuine, you will struggle to change, and with his help, obey the 10 Commandments, obey the Sermon on the Mount, live that quality of life.
For Christianity, would we consider the Gospels that aren't in the Bible, for example, Enoch, per se?
Okay.
What should we do with those?
Good. Very good question. All right. Now, I'm sorry, but if you're going to ask that question, you're going to have to go back and do some work. Okay? It's a great question, but what you're telling me is you are really concerned about some pretty technical questions. Great, but you're going to have to study. Sorry to tell you, it's not going to help you graduate from this place, but you're going to have to study that stuff if you're really thinking about it, right? All right, so you're right. There are a lot of Gnostic Gospels. Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Peter, Gospel of Mary Magdalene. A lot of Gospels that were not included in the New Testament. How on earth did Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John get included, but not the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Peter? When the New Testament was put together to 27 books of the New Testament, there were 3 questions that were asked. First question, was it written by an eyewitness or by someone who knew an eyewitness? Second question, was it accepted by the church around the world, Mediterranean, the known world of that time? Or was it just the church in Alexandria, Egypt that accepted it? It better be accepted in Alexandria, Egypt, Jerusalem, Antioch, Rome, around the Fertile Crescent there, area. Third test, was the gospel orthodox? Meaning by that, did it hold to Genesis to Malachi as being the Word of God? Now let me tell you why those Gnostic Gospels were rejected. Because the point of the Gnostic Gospels is, you're not saved by grace. You're saved by gnosis, knowledge, special insider knowledge. Gnosticism was unorthodox, meaning by that, it contradicted Genesis. It taught that the God who created the physical world is evil. The God who created the spiritual world, really, really good. Yes, based on what I just told you, who is the hero in the Gospel of Judas? Who's the hero? If the physical is evil and the spiritual is good, according to Gnosticism, who was the hero in the Gospel of Judas Iscariot?
Must be a spiritual issue.
It was Judas Iscariot. Why would Judas Iscariot be the hero? Because what did Judas Iscariot do for Jesus? Got him nailed to a cross, which means his physical body was killed, but his spirit was released. And you see, that contradicts the Bible. The Bible does not say that your body is trash. The Bible says your body is a precious gift from God, and in heaven, you're not going to be a disembodied spirit. You're going to have a resurrection body, the same way that Jesus had a resurrection body. So that is why the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Mary were rejected, because they were usually Gnostic Gospels, which means they were based on Gnostic philosophy.
In the end, the same sacrifices are made in my religion as well.
Okay, but who sacrificed his life for you that can make you right with a holy, just God?
Can you repeat, please?
All right, God is holy. You and I agree. You're Muslim, I'm Christian. We agree there is no evil in God, right? Okay, but there's evil in me. And maybe there's evil in you. I tend to think there is, but I won't make that judgment call. I know there's evil in me. Okay? So the question is, how am I made right with a morally perfect, holy God?
You ask him.
Okay. And does he forgive you?
Yes.
How do you know that?
I know it is just because that's what the actual Bible says. The actual Bible says.
Yeah, and the actual Bible talks about lambs being sacrificed, right?
Right, and we don't have the temple anymore. We don't have to do it. Everyone knows this.
Yeah, but But what's the whole point of a lamb being sacrificed? Why was blood shed?
The physical presence that it was there,
Yeah.
that doesn't exist today. That's why it's so much. That's
Right.
why back then people believed in God so much easier than we do now. Everyone here, half the people here don't. Half the people in this circle don't, because it's a struggle and it's hard. Because it's not, that presence is not there today, and it's much more of a struggle. It's not because somebody died. It doesn't say Jesus doesn't even follow the requirements to be the Messiah. The requirements to be the Messiah is the Jews will go back to Israel. There'll be a big war, stuff will happen, and eventually we all come and he'll rise up. He'll be a descendant of King David. We both. How is he? Okay, listen. A descendant, because in the Jewish faith, descendant comes descendant of your tradition, and your resort passes for your father. Jesus, who's his father?
Okay, so here's basically how I'm different from my wonderful, awesome Jewish friends. My wonderful, awesome Jewish friends insist that tradition, Moses, the Hebrew prophets, that's truth. And when I ask them, what's the evidence that Moses and tradition are true, I'm scared by the answers that I get. The reason that I follow Jesus Christ is because of his sinless life, his amazing ethical teachings, the Sermon on the Mount, his incredible death, forgiving enemies, and then his resurrection. His resurrection sets Christ apart from Moses, Isaiah, Muhammad, Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, the avatars of Hinduism. His resurrection is unique. That's why I seriously would encourage you, check out Jesus. Does that make sense?
You didn't tell me what the explanation was. What did they tell you?
They tell me it's our tradition. It's our heritage. It's our heritage.
They tell you that we can trace it back. And also, they also
You know?
tell you that, and also, first off, Moses was not sinless.
Right.
Moses killed a person, right?
Exactly.
He is the greatest prophet of all time. We both agree?
No. I think Jesus is greater than
That's what it
Moses.
says. You said Jesus is not a prophet. Jesus.
Good. In that sense, correct.
Okay. But and at the same time, there's other people in the Bible that didn't sin. The
No.
father of King David didn't sin.
Jesse?
You see, I don't know. I don't know.
Jesse sinned.
The father of King David?
Yeah.
It says specifically he did not sin.
No, it doesn't.
Yes. Okay. Well, what
Jesse
do you
didn't live a
disagree?
sinless life, and obviously David didn't. That dude was one royal sinner.
No, David did not. But okay, didn't.
Jesse
Okay, first,
sinned,
we did- okay.
but Jesus Christ did not. That sets him apart as unique, as different. Muhammad sinned, and I respect Muhammad, okay? It's not like I dump on Muhammad. In fact, I love his one of his 5 pillars, give alms to the poor. I agree with him totally. In John chapter 8, Jesus looks in the face of his enemies and says, "Which one of you can prove me guilty of sin?" His enemies are silent. A fine Jewish man, the Apostle John, who lived with Christ very closely for 3 years, in 1 John could write, "In him is no sin." So that's what the eyewitnesses say. He didn't sin, which is kind of weird, because all the rest of us sin, but not Jesus. So that demands respect. It doesn't mean he's God, obviously, but it demands respect. And then when he claims to be God and then backs it up with an historical resurrection, wow, I really got to take this guy seriously. It's pretty impressive.
Jesus has not filled any of the requirements to be the
Okay,
Messiah.
good. You're right. He did not fulfill the
Any of
kingly, no, he fulfilled the suffering servant prophecies, like Isaiah 53. He was the suffering servant who was crushed for our iniquities. But he did not, you're absolutely right, he did not fulfill the kingly messianic prophecies. He said that he would return a second time, and when he returns, it will not be as a baby born in a manger in Bethlehem. It'll be as the all-powerful God, and there will be a day of judgment, and there will be a heaven and a hell. So you see, now the question is, yeah, but Cliff, come on, where does the Bible say that the Messiah is going to come twice? Good question. It doesn't say he's going to come twice, but it also doesn't say he's just going to come once or 5 times. It is silent. So the Old Testament is silent regarding how many times Messiah is to come. Obviously, what Jesus is claiming is he comes the first time to fulfill the suffering servant prophecies like Isaiah 53, but when he comes a second time, It'll be to fulfill the kingly messianic prophecies. And there will be a day of judgment, and it will be power, not someone getting nailed to a cross.
Come out here, talk about your beliefs, say that Jesus is your best friend. What is that God?
Good question. The starting point for me is, does any type of God exist? And so I look for evidence. And I got a truckload of evidence that God, some type of God, exists. So when I move from atheism to theism, then my next question is, well, what is this God like? Who is this God? And that's where I hit a brick wall. I'm not smart enough to figure out God. But guess what? I'm not smart enough to figure you out. The only way I'm going to get to know you is if you open up and reveal the truth about who you are to me. Well, the same thing is true with God. I'm not smart enough to figure out God. The only way I'm going to get to know God is if God chooses to open up and reveal. That's where Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the avatars of Hinduism come in. They all claim to be revealing God accurately, but they contradict. So then my question is, who's speaking the truth? And when I look at Jesus Christ, at his life, teachings, death, and resurrection, I say, there is evidence that he's reliable. So it's Jesus who reveals to me what God is like, that he's loving, just and holy, faithful, keeps his promises, merciful, all-powerful, all-knowing, and really loves me. And when I respond to his love in love, wow, life takes off.
So this is more so a pursuit of knowledge in theology, to know yourself in a sense?
Part of it, yes, well put. Self-awareness, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what God is to you? Is
No.
part of yourself? I'm sorry.
No, self-awareness is part of me developing a friendship with you, right? And it's also part of me developing a relationship with God. I got to know who I am in order for me to learn to adapt to you, in order to understand you, in order to trust you and forgive you, sacrifice for you. Well, same with my relationship with God. I've got to understand who God is in order to know how to respond to God. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Fascinating question. What I meant when I said self-awareness is, I've got to understand that I'm a sinner in my relationship with you. Because if every time you and I have a problem, it's always your fault, I'm a twit.
Right. It's relative perspective based.
I don't think it's relative.
Because I have a problem with you, you have a problem with me, then it's relative in that context.
Okay.
But to you, my problem is not your problem, so on and so forth.
Okay. Here's how I build a relationship. Part of it. If I do you dirty, if I steal from you or gossip about you or am mean to you, in order for our relationship to continue, I think I have to acknowledge that. And I think I have to come up to you and say, man, I did wrong. Could you find it in your heart to forgive me for that wrong? I do a lot of marriage counseling, and what's really scary for me is when a husband and wife can't ask for forgiveness. They're always blaming the other guy, the other spouse. I mean, that just destroys a marriage, because we all hurt each other. So we better be able to ask forgiveness of each other, otherwise our relationship's going to blow up. If I'm always blaming you, well, the same thing with God. I got to have the humility to ask God for forgiveness. Otherwise, I don't think I'm going to be able to know God. That's what Jesus taught. So that's what I meant when I said self-awareness.
Okay.
And I meet a lot of spouses. This is not my problem, this is my spouse's problem. Very dangerous.